Imagine paying $400 for the same pair of sneakers you just bought for $100. Now imagine paying 4 times more for your jeans, your winter coat, even your underwear. Sounds absurd, right? But that's the cost of bringing every stitch of clothing production back to the United States, something Donald Trump has promised to do. It's a dream that sounds patriotic, logical even, but beneath the surface lies a mountain of cold, hard math that makes it almost impossible. Last year alone, China made around $1 trillion from trade with the United States. A huge slice of that came from something we don't often think about: clothing. Estimates suggest 30 to 40% of China's exports to the US are apparel. T-shirts, jeans, sneakers, most of it now made overseas. It wasn't always like this. As recently as the 1980s and early 90s, much of the clothing sold in the US was made domestically, in American or Canadian factories. But after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, things changed fast. US manufacturers couldn't compete with China's low costs. Factories shut down, workers were laid off, and slowly, American labels swapped Made in USA for Made in China. Surveys show that 82% of Americans say they'd prefer to buy goods made in the United States. That's a huge majority. But preference doesn't always translate to action, especially when the price triples. Let's go back in time. Say you bought a box of everyday stuff in 1970 for $75. Adjusted for inflation, that same box today would cost you over $600. But now, take a coat from 1970. That might have cost $75 then, but today, only about $167. Clothing inflation is far below general inflation, and the main reason is offshoring. Outsourcing to low-cost countries like China has artificially suppressed prices for decades. This is the trade-off. We lost the jobs, but we got cheaper clothes. So now the question is, can we bring those jobs back without bankrupting the average American family? Let's break it down with something simple: a pair of Nike sneakers that retail for $100. According to Nike's own sourcing data, about $25 of that is the actual cost to make the shoe in an Asian factory. That covers labor, materials, assembly, everything. Add $1 for shipping, $2.50 in duties, and you're at around $28.50. Now comes Nike's marketing machine: promotions, US operations, and wages. That's another $15. We're now at about $43.50. Tack on taxes and overhead, and Nike's profit at this stage is a slim $4.50. But Nike doesn't usually sell directly to you. It sells to retailers like Foot Locker, who buy that shoe for around $50. Foot Locker then has to make a profit too, so they price it at $100, anticipating that many pairs will eventually go on sale. In reality, discounts often drive the sale price down to $60 or $70, leaving the retailer with a razor-thin margin, maybe $10 after all is said and done. That's the delicate price ecosystem. Now ask yourself, could that entire process happen in the US and still result in a $100 sneaker? One of China's biggest advantages is cheap labor. As of mid-2024, the average US manufacturing worker earns nearly $30 an hour. In China, less than $7 an hour, and in some rural regions it's even lower. That wage goes much further in China due to a lower cost of living. Now, consider something complex like a ski jacket. Sewing one requires dozens of steps, all labor-intensive. In China, that's doable. In the US, paying American wages for that same amount of labor would send prices soaring. So how does Trump plan to close that gap? Robots. Trump's vision leans heavily on robotics, AI, and automation to replace human labor and bring costs down. The idea is to use American tech and talent to build high-tech factories, run by engineers and robot mechanics. It sounds futuristic and possible in theory. But here's the catch: the upfront investment is massive. Nike actually tried this in 2015, building a highly automated sneaker factory in Mexico. The goal was to get robots to build shoe uppers in under 75 seconds, a task that takes humans over 10 minutes. But less than 3 years later, the project was scrapped. The robots weren't productive enough, costs were still too high, it just didn't make financial sense. And even if automation does eventually take off in America, it still needs raw materials, buttons, zippers, thread, most of which still come from China or other Asian countries. Building a full supply chain here would require tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in new infrastructure, not to mention years, if not decades. To be clear, there are sectors where reshoring manufacturing makes sense. Pharmaceuticals, weapons, semiconductors, things tied to national security. But clothing? T-shirts and sneakers? Economically speaking, it's a stretch. Experts agree, even if we brought apparel manufacturing back, prices would triple or quadruple. That $100 shoe? You're now looking at $300 or $400, maybe more. So can Trump bring manufacturing home? In some cases, yes. But across the board, especially for everyday products like clothing? Not without an economic shock that most Americans simply aren't ready for. Because when you dig into the math, the factories, the labor, the automation, the materials, it all adds up to a simple truth. The Made in America dream comes with a made-for-the-1% price tag. And that, more than politics, is the real barrier. Not desire, not pride, just dollars and cents.